Third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back to the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn from The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, Hoops. It is Friday, December 4th. Michigan State coming off a huge win over Duke. Michigan off to a 3-0 start. Is that right?
3-0?
Yeah. So the pod is off and running for the 2020-21 season. And Dylan, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. I can't complain. It's been kind of
got that salad taken care of.
I got basketball all the time you can watch. It's day games. It's been good. You catch some of those Maui games this week?
I did. The Camping World Maui Invitational in Asheville, North Carolina. That's right.
Good stuff. I'm here for
we had
it.
We had a man on the scenes there, Brendan Marks from The Athletic. I assume he was just staying in a RV parked out front or something for the Tell people though, was this your first pandemic haircut that you recently got?
No, it was not my first pandemic haircut. It was just my first haircut in a while.
Okay. You look like a new man. You look like 10 years younger. You look like you're like 25.
Yeah, I look like I'm younger all the time, so we're used to that.
We have both been at the bar together when you've been carded, and I have not.
Happens often.
I'd say take it as a compliment. You don't have as much gray as I do, and your face isn't wearing years of abuse the way mine. I'm aging like a catcher's mitt. You seem to be going along quite nicely, though.
Hanging in there for now.
Attaboy. Although all of the color is been sucked from your face, because I'm pretty sure you haven't left that room in 8 months that you're currently in.
That's a little harsh. Not all of us can spend the summer on the golf course over here.
All right, let's get into it. Everyone make sure you're subscribed to The Athletic and Hoops. Obviously, it goes without saying. And leave us a review in the iTunes store. We usually tell you to do this at the end of the show. Apparently, you're supposed to do it in the beginning. So if you are listening to this through this season, you would be so kind to leave us a review. It is helpful. So go do that and subscribe while you're at it. But I want to talk about Michigan State Duke. It felt, it was a real basketball game. It was, I know it was Duke's first game of the year, and Michigan State had,
second game of the year.
Second game of the year, whereas Michigan State had 2 games under its belt. But, very much a neutral court game with no fans at Cameron. But I think there was a lot to take away from it. And I'm kind of curious. I know you were watching from afar and dialed in. If you have any immediate takeaways before we dive into this one.
My first takeaway was I felt like I was watching the game with one hand tied behind my back because there was no stat broadcast that I could watch alongside the game. So that was a struggle. But could generate those
low rent performance, Duke, with no stat broadcast.
No live 4 factors graph. It was just tough for me. But
pathetic.
My initial takeaway, I think, was it emphasized a lot of maybe what we guessed would happen this season in some of these neutral court games. Not neutral court, but away games in empty buildings. It was sort of like, it's one thing when you're watching the non-conference games in wherever, some random gym in Florida, and those are empty, whatever. It doesn't make a huge difference to me. But seeing this game and just thinking about how it might play out in the Big Ten, I think we talked a lot about how experience is going to be really valuable. And Michigan State has a lot of guys who have been in real games and played in big moments, and that was pretty apparent. Like, they're a team that you would think could maybe weather a big start by Duke in Cameron with fans. So I think when you look around and you say, oh, all we have are a few managers yelling at us at the end of the gym, like, we're going to be all right, even though we're down 15 points or whatever it is. I think that's going to happen over and over in Big Ten games this year, and it's going to be really tough for like mediocre teams where maybe they would have a home court advantage to, like, in a normal year, that 15-point lead that Duke had, whatever, early in the game, that could turn into 30 in a 5-minute span. And I think it just won't happen to that degree this year. And Michigan State deserves a lot of credit for weathering that stretch because they've been there. They know what it takes to do that. And I think that was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their older, like they've got older guys who have played in the Final Four, right?
Yeah.
Aaron Henry, Gabe Brown, Gabe Brown, his best game of his career was in the Sweet 16, like guys who have been places, even the younger guys. When you look at a Malik Hall and a Rocket Watts, these were guys that played huge roles in games like the win at Maryland last year, right? And just massive scenes.
Win at Seton Hall.
Very, very big road games. They've been there. So I agree with that. My biggest takeaway in terms of the game was, I thought it was pretty clear after watching, Michigan State play its first two games against a lot of zones. Everyone making such a big deal about the assist numbers and things like that and the way that Michigan State was sharing the ball. You saw Duke, really, I think, put an emphasis on taking away passing lanes and wanted to make kind of Michigan State play way more one-on-one ball. Guys just going downhill, having to create for themselves, and it worked to an extent. I think it was nine assists on 27 field goals. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly right. I'm looking at the box.
So, like they were successful in that way, and you saw, big shooting numbers from Aaron Henry and Rocket Watts, kind of being partially a product of that, but it also, I think, showed over the course of the game, Michigan State kind of figuring out how to play against the defense like that. And I thought it was really impressive that you saw the improvement literally over the course of the 40 minutes of that game, of making the adjustments and figuring out a way to play against a defense that was taking away stuff that it had been reliant on early, So that to me was the most impressive thing, more so than anything individually and more so than just the win itself.
Yeah, I look at a couple of things in that. Like you look at the box score and all the offensive numbers are ugly, but again, you have to put those in context. The game was just so low scoring. The first 5 minutes was so bad. You have all those turnovers in that span, and obviously it's going to look ugly. Like 9 assists to 15 turnovers. We shouldn't be sitting here saying, oh my God, Michigan State's offense is going to be dominant. But I think it's just where they're at on that learning curve. And I think you saw in the initial part of the game, Rocket gets the start, and Rocket was kind of just running around trying to do everything and playing out of control.
Yeah.
That spiraled quickly. I think as the game wore on, we saw really Aaron Henry kind of step into that featured playmaker role to a much greater extent. And then Rocket came back in as more of a scorer and kind of impacted the game in a way that was different than he tried early, right? Like, I really think that that's the answer for this team offensively. And I get like Aaron Henry, 7 of 21, 5 assists to 4 turnovers. Those numbers aren't amazing, but within the scope of the environment, the game that was going on and what he had to do, a year ago, he wouldn't have been able to get 21 shots up in a game like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think him being wired to play that way, just his emotions, the way he was like going at it on the bench and just like into the game, I haven't seen that from him really to that extent, at least outwardly.
Yeah.
And I think that him turning the corner is a huge step for this offense because I just think that it makes everyone else better, right? If Henry can be that guy, if you can put him in ball screens, then you can say, all right, Rocket, just go score. Don't try to run this team. Henry's the guy who knows what's going on. You know he's going to be the best defender on the court. Just let him kind of get to some of those playmaking spots. And he is getting downhill. He's being more aggressive with the ball. That's going to all translate to good things down the road.
Yeah, like I'd put it this way when it comes to Henry's stat line, like I think he took 20 shots because he needed to take 20 shots, right? And it was like when I saw the final box score, I said, oh shit, he took 20 shots. Like over the course of the game, it wasn't just like, oh my God, Aaron Henry is forcing so much, right? Like the looks that he were taking were there for the most part. And a lot of them really were balls on the rim that were kind of 50-50 shots. Like he could have just as easily been 11 or 12 for 21 and had just a monster game and everyone would be talking about him like an All-American or something like that. But, obviously that didn't happen. So, but the fact that he is getting the spots that he's always been able to get to, but the difference now I feel like is more so than not, he's taking 2 extra dribbles and actually getting into the paint or getting into the lane or getting into the point of making contact with a big and drawing contact or being able to finish at the rim instead of these 12-foot runners or 15-foot pull-ups and things like that. It makes a world of difference. And, teams are now going to have to game plan for him doing that. And I think spacing-wise, it's really going to open up things a lot more. And you're going to start to maybe even see I think you'll see that residual effect in looks for guys like Josh Langford, guys like Gabe Brown, guys like Joey Hauser. If you're able to kind of have those shooters set and a guy like Aaron Henry really starting to understand what it means to get the ball deep but still with your head up and maybe start kicking some passes out and things like that, like those start to be kind of things that are keys to maybe unlocking new doors of the offense in this kind of post Cassius Winston world,
Yeah. So Aaron Henry created 42 points out of ball screens in 30 games last year. He's already created 15 points out of ball screens in 3 games this year. He's taking that role over. I think that's, of all the guys on that roster, I have the most confidence that he'll make the right play, right? If you're going to put Rock in ball screens, he's just going to shoot a lot, and that'll work sometimes. It's not going to work other times. I think Henry's the guy who will kind of keep the offense, get everyone else involved in the offense, and go from there.
So while we can sit here and talk about the guards all day, right? Rocket and Henry, combined stat line from Julius Marble, Malik Hall, and Joey Hauser: 33 points, 11 of 16 field goals, 9 of 12 free throws, 22 rebounds. In terms of the difference in the game, that was it between the two teams, was that the production and efficiency of Michigan State's forwards, just in terms of black and white, if you want to separate what the two teams did well, like that's really the thing that to me kind of jumps out is where Michigan State made the difference in the game. What do you make of those guys? And I do want to talk about Julius Marble.
I think we did say that the Matthew Hurt matchup was going to be a bit of buckets for everyone, and that proved true. I mean, Duke definitely has a lot to learn defensively. There was the one possession where Jalen Johnson just had his back to the ball, just giving up no penetration.
Yeah, right.
I still don't know what to make of Michigan State's bigs. Like, I think you'd want to say, all right, this is the guy we can count on every night. It's been someone different every game, right? Kid the year started, played 5 minutes. Marble had barely played in the first 2 games, scores 12 points. Bingham was great against Notre Dame, was sort of old Marcus Bingham on Tuesday night. So the takeaway for me is that there's just so many bodies there that they're all good enough to be the guy in any given night. Like, it's a lot better to have 4 guys and one can step up instead of needing one of 2 guys to step up who maybe only step up every 3 games. So I think there's a lot to like there. Is Julius Marble going to score 12 points every game, or is this going to be kind of like Malik Hall last year where this is a scoring option in an early season game and then sort of drifts back into the rotation and we don't really see him for a while? So I still don't know that I could say who's going to be Michigan State's starting center in a month, other than not Matty Sissoko at this point. But
sure.
So that's where I'm at with the bigs. Where do you fall? Like, obviously Marble was incredible. He hit jumper. He was doing all sorts of things that he was just feeling it. But is that sustainable, do you think?
I mean, I'm inclined to say that if I had to pick one or the other, I would go toward, I think the likelihood of him being a guy who can be pretty consistently productive would be my lean. A lot of it is because of the buckets that he got. It's finishing around the rim. It wasn't, the Malik Hall outlier games last year against Maryland and Seton Hall was jump shooting, and Julius Marble was scoring the way that Julius Marble is supposed to score in this game. And he is a physical presence rebounding, and because he rebounds the way he does, Michigan State and Tom Izzo, you can earn minutes that way.
So why didn't Julius Marble play in the first 2 games?
I think a lot of it was wanting to give Bingham as much of an opportunity as possible, and he did so and earned an expanded spot there. There's only so many minutes to go around, right? They've been desperate for Bingham to find his footing now for going on. This is the third season, right? They wanted him to redshirt all along, and that just never happened. So if there was the option of being able to leave Bingham out there and let him try to get his, then that was going to be the default. This is just guesswork, but they like Marble all along. I found it interesting that he went into Tom Izzo's office and asked for more minutes. And that's what kind of led to Tuesday's showing. But after a game, you do that against Duke. I don't know how you can't ignore that. Like, you have to. I don't see why he wouldn't be. Me personally, I think he should be either the starter or the second big off the bench tonight versus Detroit Mercy.
Yeah. So how would you build the big man rotation? Because like Marcus Bingham, this is just so kind of on brand, where he's sort of this flat track bully who dominates in games where everything's going well, and then in a big game on the road or something like that, this is just like what we've seen. So I don't think that's going to help him earn that trust.
I would do basically what almost Michigan needs to do at this point. And that's basically flip things completely, where I would go with Marble starting, Bingham as the first big off the bench, just to see where he is on any given night, right? If he's locked in, okay, you can ride him. And if he is out to lunch on 4 straight possessions, it's one of those nights. Then you have Thomas Kithier, and then you have Matty Sissoko if you're up by 20, right? But then there's also in certain games, the Joey Hauser lineup is going to be something that has to be relied upon.
Yeah, and the Joey Hauser lineup isn't just about Hauser, it's about Malik Hall, who was also really good. And if you look at the box score, we are at 27 minutes with a true big. So they played small a lot, and that got Malik Hall up to 29 minutes. Obviously, Hauser's foul trouble played into that too. But
and part of that was the matchup.
Malik Hall needs to play, I think. So it's just
absolutely.
It'll be interesting how that works out, because you can any of those bigs can get kind of pushed out of the equation real quick, especially if you're like, okay, well, maybe Hauser's best out of 5. Then all of a sudden that changes everything.
Sure.
Like, would you rather play Marble more minutes or Hall more minutes?
That's a great question. And I don't know right now. I mean, right now I'd be inclined to say Hall. But so much of it is matchup dependent too. You're going to play Big Ten games where you're like, Julius Marble needs to be a shit kicker tonight, right? That's just the nature of the league. So, and like on the Hauser thing, I saw someone on Twitter say this and responded, that I agreed entirely. Like, I didn't expect Hauser to be quite as much of the big that he is, right? Were we talking about this?
I don't think so.
Of him kind of being like closer to a Matthew Hurt type of like big, like one of these guys, like an away from the basket, kind of someone who's just a little bit more passive as a big man, right? Mm-hmm. I've been pretty surprised here for those first 3 games. Like, he seems very comfortable around the basket. He seems comfortable even with his back to the basket a little bit. He can finish with both hands. He's got like that little lefty hook that he hit against Duke kind of falling to his left. Like, that's pretty high level stuff for around the basket. And he has all that stuff. He can catch and finish down there. He's very comfortable. He doesn't get pushed off of his mark. Like, he can do that. So he can play the 5. It's more a question on the defensive side, obviously, but how many true centers are you running into? This isn't last year's Big Ten. It's this year's Big Ten, right? So you have Luka, and you have
Travion,
Coburn.
There's maybe guys. Purdue got Zach Edey out here getting interior buckets left and right.
A third of the league maybe has like true centers, whereas last year was probably more than half of the league. So yeah, like, you're going to be able to play that Hauser lineup a lot.
Do you think he looks more, I don't want to say like plotting, but he moves like he looks a lot bigger than when he was at Marquette, I feel like.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's the beauty of a redshirt year too.
Yeah, he's not as perimeter. Like, I don't think as much is going to – I don't see the perimeter game that maybe we talked about some this summer as far as – like,
I don't know.
Is he going to face up and beat a guy off the dribble? it seems like it's not really that. Even against like a bigger guy,
but I think
he's more stretched with his shot than with and that kind of coincides with that. You need him around the basket because he's been great cutting, finishing,
right,
getting those kind of buckets, which maybe we didn't expect. So it's sort of his game has flipped a little bit for me.
But I also think you're going to see more pick and pop stuff with him going forward.
Yeah, and because I think his shot is there. I don't know if you're going to see pick, pop, and drive.
No.
I think it's going to be pick, pop, and move the ball, or pick, pop, and shoot.
And
whereas
that's also something I would say now, like today. I think that's something that can develop, though, where you'll, in the course of time, it could be the middle of this year, it could be next year, whatever. But that's definitely the catch, see a gap and take 3 dribbles and go finish. I certainly could see him. I would project to him to be able to do that.
Yeah, that'll be something to watch just to see where he kind of comes down in that regard. But yeah, there hasn't really been any pick and pop for him yet, which is what I would have expected a lot of. And I don't. That's probably
part of
because
it's
matchups, and you play some zone teams, and you don't have like that natural guard you're just going to put in ball screens. Like you're trying to bring Henry along to get into that role. It's not like you're just going to dial him up 30 times in a game like you might have done with Winston. I think we have to talk about Michigan State's defense a little bit. We talked on the pod before that game and said this team has a way higher ceiling defensively. I think that's pretty much reinforced. I think they're going to be the best defensive team in the Big Ten. Henry looks incredible to me off the ball defensively. And the way, like, before he was good defensively, but now he's good defensively and is sort of making all the defensive event plays, right? Blocks, steals, helps. He's way more involved, I feel like, where he used to just be solid in his role. Now he's just a terror on that side of the ball. I don't know if he's gotten bigger or stronger or just more confident or what, but he's everywhere defensively. And I think that's a scary sight because you don't need to put him at guarding the best perimeter guy because Rocket can do that. You don't need to. He just makes everyone better in his role. So you think
that Michigan State held DJ Stewart and Wendell Moore to a combined 0 for 16 shooting in this game. It's Rocket and Aaron Henry, right? I mean, they're just absolute. They just ruin guys. And there's no reason to think that is not just the case all year.
I think Duke just took another jab step 3. But and Duke will be fine, and that'll be a good win, but that team has a lot to figure out. They weren't really running anything for most of that game. The only time they really scored effectively was when Michigan State was just giving them the ball and letting them run down the court and get a layup. So that doesn't take away from Michigan State's defense to me, but man, the Duke team is a mess.
They're a mess, but also, when the 3-point line's being defended that way, you hold Duke to 5 of 23 3-point shooting in its own building. A lot of it has to do with, yes, they weren't dialing up typical Duke looks, but still, Jesus.
They weren't dialing up offense.
Yeah, there you go.
They were 1 pass, 1 jab step, 1 3. Next try. That was the offense. But and that's what happens when you have DJ Stewart. That's all he's really done, right? So it makes sense. But I guess anything else, I'm trying to look through this box score and see if there's anything we didn't hit on. I think it was baked to see Langford hit a 3 in that environment and just kind of show he can play. Just a lot of pieces here. What do you think this Michigan State team needs to sort of, like, what do you need to change by Big Ten play, essentially? Like, where do you think that the emphasis needs to be over these? Because you got a couple bye games coming up. You have Virginia.
Right.
Where, like, what
I think
needs
a lot
to get
of it,
there?
A lot of it's still, I think, Rocket Watts maybe understanding place and possession a little bit more. And, there are still times where he just needs to kind of dial things down a touch and not force things. And, a lot of that's going to be film, right? Like, the interesting part about like his offseason was everyone was like, Rocket Watts is watching so much film. This is a huge thing. I'm like, what film is he watching? Film of himself just taking threes, or film of Cassius Winston playing point guard? Because both of those things are useless, right? Like, you can show him as much Cassius Winston film as you want, as like, this is what a point guard looks like. But that doesn't do anything, because like, he will never play that way. He's a completely different player. Like, you need film of Rocket Watts playing the way that he's playing right now to be like, don't do this shit anymore, you know? And that's what you have out of 3 games now. And some of that's going to be, he's going to need to start to mature mentally and get more into realizing that there's a time and a place for everything. And then the other thing is they need to finish these games better too. I don't think it's, I wouldn't ring alarm bells, but when you are against both Notre Dame and Duke, they just got a little fat and happy and sloppy late in these games, and made things probably a little bit more uncomfortable than they need to. And the nature of the Big Ten, like, there are going to be a lot of games where you're up 10 with 3 minutes to go. And in the Big Ten, you can still lose those games. They did it last year. What was it, Maryland at Breslin? They just kind of farted away late in the game. Like, you need to, good teams know how to win games, right? And you have to finish these a little bit better, be a little cleaner.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the Virginia game will be really telling, because that'll be – I just want to see how this offense responds to that sort of pack line defense, because that's really fitting for like what you're going to see in the Big Ten. Duke, that's not how Duke plays, but Big Ten teams don't play like Duke. And I want to see, if you get in a drag-out, brutally slow half-court game, how does Aaron Henry respond to that? Because you're going to have to like step up and make mid-range jumpers, do all these things. It's not fun.
Like we talked about the Duke game, Duke's ability to take away passing lanes and stuff like that and make Michigan State play more one-on-one. Well, you're not assisting on 80% of your baskets against Virginia. It's not happening, right? Like,
but you're not. It's a style that you're not really prepared for, I think, as a lead guard until, like I always say, like, just think about how people have played in Michigan's offense. The first time you go to Wisconsin, it'll tell you a lot about how ready you are to take that role. Like, there's just so many times Jordan Poole is shooting 100 shots and missing them all. Like, it just kind of tests you and forces you into playing away as a playmaker that maybe you don't know if you're ready for until you do it. So that'll be a really good test, because they play Wisconsin, 2 weeks after that. So that's a great kind of scheduling quirk where they get ready for that, because that Wisconsin game on Christmas is going to be massive. As far as the Big Ten, because I would say Michigan State and Wisconsin look like the 2 best teams in the league right now.
Yeah. I thought Illinois was going to have a little bit of a better showing against Baylor, but Baylor looks like a fucking world beater. So let's just touch real quick on tonight's game. Michigan State is hosting Detroit Mercy. Detroit Mercy's coming off 8-12 season, 6-12 in the horizon. Obviously, the name everyone knows, at least in this state, is Anton Davis. This is the son of Mike Davis, the head coach. Anton, he took 38% of Detroit Mercy shots last year. 623 field goal attempts, 312 of them were threes. He's a guy who he can score 40. I don't think he's going to score 40 against Michigan State. He might take 40 shots, but that'd be it. Of most of note here is Detroit Mercy plays a ton of zone. I didn't look up their synergy numbers, but just from watching them last year, they play all kinds of goofy matchup zone defenses. I'm sure you're pulling up the numbers right now, but a lot of matchup zone. And they were 326th in the country in defensive efficiency last year. They were 345th in the country in allowing assisted field goals, 62%. Opposing team shot 39% on threes. So that should give you an idea of what this might look like tonight.
I would like to see Michigan State just go and try to assist every made field goal for a game and see if they could set the record. But Detroit played zone 63% of possessions. Also notable, their man defense graded out in the first percentile nationally. So they had basically the worst man-to-man defense in the country last year. So
Well,
neither
good
option
reason.
is particularly great. They had a COVID thing, right? Also,
Yeah.
so they
yeah.
were shut down.
Yes. This is their first game of the year.
So if you aren't going to your local sports book and just trying to put everything on Michigan State by 20, whatever the spread is.
I have
Do you know the spread?
The spread was 25.5 when I looked this morning, and I have no idea why it's that low. I thought it was going to be like 33, 34. So
You
take
do
that
have
for
to
what it's
account
worth.
for Steven Izzo time, though.
That's true. That is very true.
So
I don't know who Detroit Mercy's even putting out there that's making buckets at that time, though, unless Anton's just playing 40 minutes, which he might. A name to watch tonight is Torrin Thompson. Might sound familiar to some people. 6'11", 235-pound big. He played at Syracuse in 2016-17, was good, legit good. Averaged 9 and 4 in 18 minutes per game. They were really high on him. And then he ended up transferring to Seton Hall. So he sat out 17-18 as a transfer and then basically fell off the map. He played like 10 minutes a game his redshirt sophomore year. He played one game last year. In a little, I don't know if this has anything to do with him having a smaller role at Seton Hall, but he was the guy, if you remember when Kevin Willard and Seton Hall got slapped with NCAA problems for tampering, and Willard, he was suspended for one game. The program was docked a scholarship. This was him. This was the kid, Torrin Thompson, when he transferred from from Syracuse to Seton Hall. It was his mom having contact with a Seton Hall assistant, Shaheen Holloway, who's now the head coach at St. Pete's. He got like a 4-game suspension and a 20-month show cause, and still got a head coaching job, which is pretty impressive. But he's a dude who will, I imagine Thompson dominates the Horizon League at 6'11". I don't know what he does for them tonight in his first game. They've got all kinds of goofy transfers. They got a kid from St. Bonaventure, a kid from Niagara, a kid from Cal Baptist. Brad Calipari is on Detroit Mercy. He made 46 threes last year. He's Cal's son. Dwayne Rose Jr. is on this team. He's Derrick Rose's nephew. He averaged like 7 points last year. So I don't know. It's Detroit Mercy. They're going to lose by 35 or 40, I would think. But another chance for Michigan State to get all of the assists. So I'm going to predict. Here's a question for you, Dylan. Over under tonight. 26 assists for Michigan State.
Let's think.
It's a huge number.
That's a lot of assists. So Michigan State had 27 assists against Eastern, though, and put up 83 points. I'll go with the over.
Okay. I like it.
I think mid-20s is a lock in assists.
Definitely. For sure. Okay. Let's jump over to Michigan.
All right, let's do it.
What do you got?
What do you got? So Michigan, better performance on Wednesday against Ball State. They actually showed up to play out of the gate and didn't kind of bog down into a close game. There's one guy in the post-game press conference who was convinced that Ball State going on a small run in the second half was enough, or in the first half was enough to ruin the performance. But that's actually just how basketball works. I think I just look at these first 3 games Michigan has played, and I feel like Juwan Howard has almost treated them like a glorified scrimmage. I feel like he's tried so many different looks. He's played different people. He plays different people in the first half and the second half. I think that's good as far as getting everyone a look and seeing what you have. I also feel like Michigan hasn't really made progress toward figuring out the best version of itself. Like I feel like it's been more about everyone individually getting a try and less about, well, this is what we do best. Like they just try different things at different times. Like there's 5 minutes where it's all Franz Wagner running the offense. There's 5 minutes where it's all Isaiah Livers. It's good, I guess, to have that many different options, but what are you going to do when the chips are down and you need to score late in the game? Like, I don't know. I think you'd like to see a little more refinement as far as big picture, like this is what we do best. I don't know what Michigan's identity is yet.
Is Isaiah Livers being a 70% shooter from the field as an identity?
I mean, that's great, but I don't know.
No,
they don't
I
even go
agree.
to that all the time. So if
I
you're going
agree
to make
with
all
you.
your shots, maybe you need to shoot more. But no, there's going to be. It's sort of like all these different things throughout the course of a game. Like, okay, now we're going to play through Hunter Dickinson. Well, now let's see what Mike Smith does in ball screens. Like last year, it was very set in stone. You're going to run 35 Xavier Simpson ball screens. He's going to make the best play and find who he needs to find. It's good to be multidimensional, but it's probably just because these games have, I guess the one game was very competitive, but the plan going into these games, I think, was probably to see what you're working with because none of these options are really proven or guaranteed.
What do you like the most right now?
I'm not sure. It's a lot of
That's a worrisome answer.
it's a lot of B+ options. I'm not sure there's one A+ that you want to say this is absolutely my go-to. They're all coming along kind of at their own pace, right?
Sure.
Like Isaiah Livers is great when he makes every shot. Isaiah Livers is playing more, or he looks more confident in on-ball situations, but if they blitz him, is he really going to be ready to not turn the ball over and make the right passes? Franz Wagner looks great for 2 minutes at a time when he goes in transition, but he literally didn't score after the first media timeout in either half. Like, why does he just completely leave the offense? So
Yes.
I don't know what I like the most. I think there's so many things that you like a little bit.
Yeah, and once like Brandon Johns being a perfect example, it's like you see something for one stretch and you're like, oh, I like that a lot, right? And then it doesn't really kind of continue to come to fruition, or it disappears, or you wonder, what's going on there. Johns in this last game, I think we talked about on the last pod, we were super high on him, and then he goes out and it looked like he had never played with this team before. And it's just kind of inexplicable stuff like that. Obviously that's a extreme, but you get my point.
Yeah, my big problem is still that the 5 players who played the most minutes on Michigan's roster, I think everyone would say they're the best players. They've played, I think, 8 possessions together in 3 games. And obviously that's because you're starting Austin Davis and then you're just kind of shuffling through bench guys. But those are your best 5 players. I think at some point it would be worth playing them together and seeing what that can do. And maybe the idea is,
for those listening, who are your 5?
Mike Smith, Eli Brooks, Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, Hunter Dickinson.
Yeah.
Those guys lead Michigan in minutes and have played together for a handful of possessions. Maybe the argument is we want to play through Hunter with the bench unit, whatever else. There could be a case. I just think you want to get that unit looks together and see if that really what that looks like. It just seems crazy. It's crazy to me in the sense, I don't know how you can even do that where you play these guys the most minutes and they're never on the court together. That's hard to accomplish. But that's where I come down, and it'll be interesting how that changes with tougher competition coming up.
Yes. So all that said, they are 3-0. They looked, I thought, pretty good against Ball State. But now you got a couple real games, UCF, NC State. UCF beat Auburn on Monday. Yeah, Monday. So Auburn isn't very good, but that's a notable win. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we've watched, to your point, I feel like we've watched Michigan for 3 games, and it's still like I still have just as many questions as I did in the preseason.
Yeah, as I wrote in my recap, the one thing I'm pretty confident of is that Michigan would win the MAC this year. Beyond that, who knows yet, right? Like I love how Mike Smith has played in spurts, but I don't think tearing up MAC teams really tells us that he's going to be ready to play in the Big Ten. I do think there's a real value that he's shown in being able to run the team, and I like how he's picked his spots offensively. He knows when to score and when to pass. I know you were harping on that fact a lot in the offseason, right? Like this guy shoots all the time at Columbia.
Right.
He looks really comfortable.
He does.
As far as when to go, when to pass, when to just defer. And so I think that's encouraging. It's just hard to know what translates against better teams. And I guess, now Michigan doesn't play any more of these bye games really. So you're going to find out quick and have to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, it's totally bizarre. I mean, they have 2 more non-conference games. That's it. And then it's into Big Ten play. Defense. You've already, of course, gone into your on-off stats, found some relatively interesting numbers. It's extremely early, but they're not nothing. Eli Brooks. Why don't you get into those numbers for me?
I think we knew going into this year Eli was Michigan's best defender. He was fantastic. I thought of against Ball State. I had a clip in my 5 takeaways of him just chasing down ball screens, kind of doing a rear contest when just playing. He makes a lot of plays defensively that you don't necessarily see in the box score. And the stat I had was that Michigan's allowing 0.84 points per possession with Eli on the court and 1.23 when he's on the bench. That's basically
pretty big difference.
Best defense in the Big Ten, worst defense in the Big Ten the last decade sort of splits. Obviously, there's way too small of a sample size to really do anything with that number, but it also backs up what we know and what we've seen from him over the last couple of years. Maybe not the most appreciated player, but I do think it speaks to how important he is. And a lot of people are trying to come up with ways to maybe cut his minutes down, like more minutes for Sean D. Brown, more minutes for Brandon Johns.
Okay.
The level of understanding that Eli Brooks has on both sides of the court is exponentially higher than both of those guys. Obviously, the fact that Johns is a little farther behind is more disappointing, but Sean D. Brown is new to the system. I mean, Juwan literally stopped after the first half ended and walked him through the last play they tried to run on the court. Like, These things are not – like, he's coming along a little slower, and he has more raw tools maybe to be a better player than Eli Brooks, you might say. He's bigger, more athletic. But just you're going to get so much more out of Eli right now. So I think Sean D, of all the guys on the team, is really in maybe the perfect role where he can just come in, take open shots, make effort plays defensively, and fit in. But Eli is just the constant to this team that I think you're going to need going forward.
Yeah, the only guys who really can't leave the floor are Eli and Isaiah Livers and, Franz to an extent. I mean, Franz, I don't see Franz being like a 37-minute-a-night guy, right? Necessarily. Maybe I'm wrong there. But, Livers and Brooks are going to be playing 37 minutes a night in Big Ten play, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Franz will be up there. And, the question is going to be how much does Mike Smith have to stay on the floor against good defenses? And I don't know.
And that's so hard to tell. I still have no idea. Yeah. Because we could see him in a first game against, real physical guards with size, and he could just be swallowed for all we know.
Or we could see Michigan's offense just sort of grind to a halt against those teams, and you need someone to move the ball, get up, in a way that Eli doesn't really do. So that, I think, is the big question about how the rotation shakes out, at least as far as backcourt minutes are concerned.
Yeah. I mean, the good news for Michigan is that the beginning of its Big Ten schedule is bullshit. Penn State, Nebraska, Maryland, Northwestern, Minnesota, Penn State. You couldn't have been gifted a better schedule in terms of a team that's trying to figure itself out.
Yeah, to be fair, Maryland looks a little better than maybe we thought. But they also have played mostly bullshit games.
Yeah, I would still say that Michigan is 8 points better than Maryland on a neutral floor right now.
Talking about the best shooting team in the country, Maryland Terrapins. So slow down there. What do you think? How does Austin Davis continue to start? How long does this go? I feel like we're going to talk about this every podcast.
I mean,
that has to change, right?
I was told earlier this week that it's coming and that it was going to be Dickinson starting, Johns as your primary backup, and Austin, still kind of going back to being Austin Davis. I thought there was a chance we were going to see that in the last game, and it just
instead the first half rotation was Davis, Dickinson, Davis. You didn't even see Johns at center until Davis got his second foul. So
Davis was still in the game after the first media timeout.
Yes,
he came in and played 3 more possessions or something. And I was just sitting up top, just being just scratching my head. I just don't understand it at all. And at this point, it's Austin Davis has been given his due respect as a 5th-year senior. but it's time to go with what works.
Yeah, Davis is a great third big to have. He shouldn't be.
And there has been, in fairness, like in the first half of these games, Dickinson has not looked great. It's been the second half has been when he's looked really strong. And maybe it's because he's been sitting there watching the game, and I have no idea. But like especially in the Oakland game, if you go back and rewatch like his first half in the Oakland game, there was a reason he didn't play that much. Like he was just kind of running around, not doing anything, and was lost defensively a few times. So like he hasn't been perfect.
No, and he had more freshman mistakes, I think, in that Ball State game too. He missed some bunnies and did some things, but that's going to happen. I think you want to play through that at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you also need him to play minutes to get some of that out of his system, right?
Yeah, and maybe play more minutes with Michigan's best players instead of with the backups.
So, you're playing a real game this weekend. It's time. I will be utterly confused if Austin Davis is still starting this game.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I feel like I've been saying this on every podcast, but
we have. It's been the same conversation.
We're going to have to keep having it until it changes because
there's
just so much more upside to making that shift. And
I think everything Austin Davis does, Hunter Dickinson can do. So it's like, even when you see Austin Davis turn his shoulder and bury some 6'7" guy and make a layup, you're like, oh yeah, see, Austin Davis can do that. You're like, well, that's great. So can Hunter Dickinson can just dunk on that guy's head. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, and I think Hunter's conditioning hasn't looked that bad to me. Like, I think he can get through a shift just as well as Austin Davis can, right? Like, I noticed Austin Davis being winded more than Hunter Dickinson when they're both playing for extended periods of time. Austin was really sucking wind in that there was a long first half stretch where there was not really any stoppages, and Austin starts dragging. I haven't seen that from Hunter as much, and we've seen them play through him for 10 minutes in a row, basically, against Oakland, and he was fine, I thought. So, I don't know. I think you got to go with it. I think you got to get him up to 25 minutes a game because I don't know what you're doing if you're not. Like, why do you recruit Hunter Dickinson? Why do you have him on the court to do this and then play Austin Davis? I don't get it.
Right. And when are he and his people going to start saying, we can't help but notice this doesn't make any sense? I don't know.
Yeah. So UCF, we want to talk a little bit about them. Kind of a weird situation.
Give the preview while I get some coffee.
So Johnny Dawkins really has the reputation of a defensive coach, but if you look a little closer at their numbers, they basically had a great defense when Taco Fall was there because it's nice to have a 7'4" guy stand in front of the rim. Those numbers fell off a bit last year. The question will be, is this a good defensive team this year? There's some big names, two former top 100 transfers, Darius Perry, who we saw Michigan play against at Louisville last year, and then CJ Walker, who was a 5-star freshman last year at Oregon and basically fell out of the rotation at the end of the year. Now he's back home at UCF. They have talent. They have athleticism. They'll look like dudes when they get off the court or off the bus, but the production isn't quite there. Walker, I have a video that'll be up in our preview, and he'll have moments where he looks incredible, and then he just also has moments where he looks like he has no idea really how to play basketball. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of one of those situations where they're big, athletic. I just don't know how much they're really going to test you with their offense. Like, they don't run a lot. So that's where I'll look. The game against Auburn was just a disaster. Both teams. There was more.
It was 63-55
in a 76 possession game, and there were as many turnovers, 41, as made field goals in the game. So it was just a disaster. Auburn shot 21% on threes. Remind you, this team shoots more threes than anyone else in the country. Just about shot 21%. And then they shot 36%, 8 of 22 on free throws. So just a disastrous game. I think that's probably the kind of game UCF's comfortable playing, though. They'll want to muck things up, try to force some turnovers and use their length. But, yeah, that's where I'm at with UCF. Darius Perry didn't play in the opener.
Is he playing?
Undisclosed injury. It doesn't seem like there's any update there. So they don't really have a point guard without him. So that's a key factor to watch.
Looks like their starters go 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", 6'8", 6'9".
Yeah, I mean they're like big and athletic. They don't look particularly well coached, and that doesn't include CJ Walker, who came off the bench in the first game and played 32 minutes. They started a freshman center, and then he only played 7 minutes. The only really experienced big they had returning only played 7 seconds. So I don't really know what they're doing with rotations, but should be interesting. Certainly more raw talent than these teams Michigan has been playing against. Just a question of whether I think Michigan can not turn the ball over and run stuff against some of that athleticism. And that's like a big step up from what they've been doing, right?
Right. But it's also when you see a team that doesn't have a starter over 6'9", you again say, hey, maybe dial up the 7'2", 255-pound guy kind of early.
Yeah, they do have a 6'11", 245 guy who has played. He just didn't play against Auburn. I don't know if that was because of how Auburn played. I mean, he played the last 7 seconds of the first half, and that was it.
Yeah, because Auburn does play that like pressure, full court kind of just chaos defense type deal.
So I would think if Hunter Dickinson's going to work inside, they would put Diggs out there, who is a legitimate like senior big man who's played at least in the American a little bit. I don't think he's particularly great, but that's at least an option they have, which a lot of these smaller schools don't even have that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to see the most in these two games, this UCF and NC State? Do you want to see them? Do you want to see Michigan kind of find that definitive thing? Because I don't think that's going to happen, first of all. Or do you want to see more stuff kind of on like individual basis?
I think the big thing, at least in this initial game for me, is going to be how Mike Smith looks against sort of real athleticism. I don't really think Eli would fare particularly well kind of dealing with UCF's pressure, and can Mike Smith get Michigan into its offense and deal with that pressure and then hang for himself on defense, right?
And what does UCF's pressure look like? Is like a 3/4 court thing? Are they trapping? What were they doing?
They'll do a lot of different things. They only pressed a few possessions, but they'll also trap a ball screen or just kind of like bring all different looks to try to force turnovers throughout the game, really, is what I've seen in the limited film I've watched. Also notable, they've had 2,000 fans at their season opener, which is different than what we'll see at Chrysler. But
horrifying, but okay.
I just think, like, is Michigan ready to junk it up in a game like this? Oakland threw a lot of bullshit at them and then got to all the 50-50 balls. Like, is Michigan ready to play in that kind of game where they could rely on being bigger and more athletic against these other teams, but you got to actually be first to the ball and kind of have that edge that I don't know if we've seen yet. So that's what I'll look for on a team level first, and then you can get into all the other stuff, but that'll come with time.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with all that. I would like to see Franz at some point start to look like, I think, the Franz Wagner that we were anticipating a little bit. I'm not like worried per se yet about kind of what his game has looked like, but I thought it was going to look a little better than it has. He's looked frustrated. It doesn't look like he's been like enjoying playing through all 3 games this year. It looks like he's kind of, I don't know if it's because he wants to be doing more. I don't know if it's because just the shots aren't falling, like he just hasn't, to me, looked particularly comfortable. I don't know if I could be misreading. I could be overreading. I don't know. But at some point, right, you want to see Franz Wagner go and put out a dominant like performance, right? We both picked him first team all league. You and I both did. He hasn't looked even remotely close to that conversation.
Do you ever get the sense or like the feeling watching Michigan that like they've spent time like inter squad scrimmages with Isaiah Livers on one team and Franz Wagner on the other team and don't really have the way for them both to kind of complement each other in one offense?
Great point. And in that set is Isaiah Livers guarding Franz Wagner because he's probably blowing by him all preseason.
But that's just the disjointed way it feels to me at times. Like,
yeah,
they don't complement each other well necessarily. So it ends up sort of this my turn, your turn situation where you can only call one of their numbers and both are going to shoot 75% of the time you dial them up. So it leads to, like, another thing, we talk about the rotation. Maybe you stagger their minutes more, right? Like, they're going to play a lot together, but they're playing always together, right? What if you can tweak the rotation so you have some overlap there? So
right, and you do have Sean D. Brown, so like you do kind of have the piece that enables that, and Brandon Johns.
So Sean D. Brown is the guy you never have to call his number. Like, I get uncomfortable when Sean D. Brown's number gets called because it's an adventure when he starts dribbling into the paint. A lot of people are maybe frustrated he shot 10 threes and went 1 of 10 or whatever against Oakland. I think that's what he needs to do on this team, more than like make hustle plays, putbacks, cuts, but don't try to be a guy who's going to make plays off the dribble because that's just not really in his DNA, and he doesn't look comfortable doing that. But I'll be curious.
If the ball swings to him, right, and he just has a driveway, like, that's fine because he can go and draw contact and attack. But yeah, I mean, if he sees a man, if there's a man in front of him, there's no reason for him to dribble.
But I think that if that could help find a way to maybe get Franz on track. He only took, I think, I had the stat in my 5 takeaways, but I think 4 shots. He used 4 possessions in the half court in that game against Ball State. That's a really low number. He's just not getting the usage. And part of that is because a lot of his usage came off the ball, and there's not a Xavier Simpson whipping him the ball around a ball screen this time. The other time his numbers just not really coming up as far as ball screens. Like, he had 2 ball screens. They were just early in each half, and then he kind of floated out of the picture. So UCF has a bad transition defense. At least they did last year. I think that's a big opportunity for him to kind of get going. Him as a rip and run guy is really his most impactful thing he's done this year. So I'll look for that as an opportunity. I don't know, though, if they can find a way to get him going in the half court with everything else going at the same time. So that's certainly something to watch at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't know if I have too much more on Michigan. It's like, I feel like our conversation a week from now on Michigan will be a lot more fruitful than this. And bigger questions are going to be whether it's, hey, this thing's coming together, or there's major issues going into league play.
Yeah, I think there should be issues. Like, I don't think it's bad if issues come, like where this team is at. I think if UCF and NC State just get rolled by Michigan, I'd be more worried about UCF and NC State, right? Like, Michigan doesn't have this whole thing figured out. There should be negative takeaways from these next 2 games. I think you want to just, like we said, this run up to the league is pretty manageable. So you'd like to be able to, all right, well, damn, we really better work on this, but we won. All right, we need to work on this, but we won. Like, that's a good way to build if you can get by with it. UCF, I think, the one thing I didn't mention, their best player opted out of the season. So that's another key takeaway. They had a big man, Colin Smith, who was going to be a senior and potential all-league guy, and he opted out in October. So this game is not as daunting as maybe you would have thought in the preseason, and I don't think you thought it was particularly daunting in the preseason either.
Right.
So I think there's a good sort of ramp up, because I think NC State actually does look like a decent team. So this will be a game where you maybe get some of those kinks figured out and like, all right, this is what we can and can't do against real athletes. And then you go against a team that's probably athletic and a little better coached and just more talented all around.
Yeah. One thing I do like is that NC State will play UConn before Michigan. So you might actually have, like, before Michigan plays NC State, you might actually have like a measure of what NC State is, as opposed to them just kicking the shit out of 3 low majors, right? And then playing Michigan. And if Michigan beats NC State, you're still like, well, what the hell does that mean, right? So that's worthwhile.
I'll certainly enjoy writing a preview about a team that's played more than 1 game, so I'll take that. It's like every game is a season opener at this point. It's
exactly.
Brutal.
All right, you got anything else?
No, I think that's a wrap.
I think that's it. We will Be back next week with probably more talk on Michigan State, but going into the Big Ten ACC Challenge, we will have a Big Ten episode where we just kind of go around the league and look at everyone through these first few games. So be sure to look out for that coming up. But until then, thanks for listening. Be sure to rate, review, subscribe, do whatever you got to do. Subscribe to The Athletic and to UM Hoops, and be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.